Friend from Texas and I are going to get to continue talking about a few tanks. My amendment would require the Secretary of Energy to determine whether curtailing U.S. oil exports would be more effective than drawing from the SPR to stabilize U.S. oil prices and protect U.S. energy security. If it is determined that curtailing oil exports would be more effective, the increased drilling on federal lands otherwise required by H.R. 21 would not be allowed. Now, Mr. Speaker, H.R. 21 is based on the false premise that a drawdown from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve weakens our energy security and therefore must be made up for by expanding drilling on federal land. Let's run through a little history here. Strategic Petroleum Reserve was created in 1975 in response to the first OPEC price shocks to provide a domestic buffer against future global market volatility and supply constraints. We had that oil in our country, we wanted to use that to bolster domestic supplies. The conditions under which it were created changed in October 2019. That was the month when the United States, for the first time, became a net oil exporter, and we have remained one since. That means, as you know, that for the last 4 years, we have had not one but two tools we could use to protect ourselves domestically from global volatility. We could either release from those few tanks in the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, or we could reduce the exports that are leaving our country, keep that, and prioritize good old apple pie smelling United States oil for United States use. Now, as an economic matter, both of those are equivalent, right? If we had a barrel to our domestic supplies, that's a barrel we don't have to import. That's a barrel that eases price pressure internally, regardless of where that barrel came from. And moreover, and this is important because this is about those few tanks we were talking about before, the volume of oil that we export today is way bigger than the amount that we release from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. If I may, Mr. Speaker, most of our Strategic Petroleum Reserve is still underground. When the United States became a net exporter in 2019, though, something changed. The thing that changed was the politics of this conversation, because it created a new set of players at the table. Oil exporters who have a vested interest in a high oil price. They don't seek to maximize value for the American people. They seek to maximize value for their shareholders. I would point out many of their shareholders are not U.S. citizens. They want to maximize that value by selling American oil overseas at the highest possible price. Now, let's be really clear. Every single American is an energy consumer. A tiny number of Americans are oil exporters. The greater good is always to maximize the benefit to U.S. consumers by lowering energy prices. So I've introduced this amendment to ensure that we use the full suite of tools available to us when we face domestic price or supply constraints, inclusive of SPR releases and export curtailments. This amendment would simply direct the Secretary of Energy to determine whether curtailing U.S. exports would be more effective than drawing from the SPR at stabilizing U.S. oil prices and protecting U.S. energy security. And if it's determined that curtailing exports would be more effective, the increased drilling on federal lands otherwise required by H.R. 21 would not be allowed. Mr. Speaker, I urge my colleagues to support the amendment, and I yield back.